Althea stepped out of her sleek black car, adjusting the cuffs of her designer coat as she gazed up at the grand entrance of the Regal Crest Hotel. The building was a symbol of wealth and luxury, with its golden chandeliers visible even from outside. She had stayed in five-star hotels across the world, but this one had been recommended by a colleague as a historic landmark known for its elegance. She expected nothing less than excellent service. She walked confidently through the glass doors, the scent of fresh lilies and polished wood filling the air. Guests in expensive suits and elegant dresses chatted over drinks in the lobby, the soft hum of a grand piano playing in the background. Althea approached the reception desk with a warm smile, setting down her designer handbag as she reached for her phone to confirm her reservation. The young receptionist, a blonde woman in a neatly pressed uniform, looked up at Althea and hesitated. Her smile was polite but tight, her eyes scanning Althea from head to toe in a way that felt too calculating. Althea had seen that look before, the kind that questioned whether she belonged in a place like this. "Good evening," Althea said smoothly. "I have a reservation under the name Althea Monroe." The receptionist blinked and forced another smile. "Let me check," she said, clicking on her computer. A moment passed. Then another. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't type anything. Instead, she turned slightly to whisper something to an older man in a manager's suit standing nearby. Althea arched a brow. She had booked the hotel well in advance, confirming her suite twice. There shouldn't have been a problem. The manager, a middle-aged man with graying hair, approached with the same polite but distant expression. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, folding his hands. "It seems we can't find your reservation in our system." Althea glanced at her phone, quickly pulling up the email confirmation. "That's strange. I have the confirmation right here. See." She turned her screen toward them, showing the email that clearly stated her name, booking details, and payment confirmation. The manager barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "There must have been an error. Unfortunately, we are fully booked for the night." Althea's expression remained calm, but inside, she felt something tighten in her chest. She had heard stories like this before, of people like her being denied service in places where they were more than qualified to be. Still, she gave them the benefit of the doubt. "Fully booked," she echoed. "That's interesting. I see quite a few people checking in." She gestured towards a couple who had just received their keys with no issue. The manager cleared his throat. "Those guests had prior arrangements," he said quickly. "I'm afraid there's nothing we can do." Althea knew exactly what was happening. The unspoken message was clear. She wasn't welcome here. For a long moment, she said nothing. She simply studied their faces, the tightness in their smiles, the discomfort in their eyes. They didn't expect her to fight back. They expected her to walk away, embarrassed. But Althea Monroe never walked away from a challenge. She picked up her bag, gave them a slow, knowing smile, and said, "That's all right. I'll make other arrangements." Then she turned and walked out, but not before making one silent promise to herself. She would return, and when she did, this hotel would belong to her. As Althea stepped out of the hotel, the crisp evening air hit her face, but it wasn't the cold that sent a shiver down her spine. It was the quiet anger bubbling inside her. She wasn't surprised by what had just happened. She had seen this kind of treatment before, but that didn't mean she would let it go. She walked to her car, her driver holding the door open for her. As she slid into the seat, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through the email confirming her reservation. Everything was in order. The hotel had lied. She took a deep breath and thought for a moment. She could have caused a scene, demanded an explanation, even called the press. But Althea Monroe never wasted her energy on anger. No, she believed in something much more powerful: action. Instead of heading home, she instructed her driver to take her to another five-star hotel in the city, one she had visited before. When she walked in, she was greeted with the warmth and professionalism she deserved. Within minutes, she was checked into a luxury suite with a breathtaking city view. The difference in service was clear, and it only made her more determined. That night, as she sat on the plush sofa in her suite, she opened her laptop and started researching the Regal Crest Hotel. It was an old, family-owned establishment with a reputation for exclusivity. The current owner was struggling financially, trying to keep up with bigger hotel chains. A small smile played on Althea's lips. That was an opportunity. She called one of her top business advisors. "I need you to look into the Regal Crest Hotel," she said. "Find out how much it's worth, what debts they have, and if they're open to selling." Her advisor hesitated. "Are you thinking of acquiring it?" Althea leaned back, staring at the city lights outside her window. "Not just acquiring it," she said. "I'm going to own it. And when I do, I'll make sure no one else has to experience what I did tonight." She ended the call and took a deep breath. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, for those who had been made to feel like they didn't belong. The next morning, news of her experience had already spread. A few people had recognized her at the hotel. And soon, social media was buzzing. A billionaire businesswoman denied a hotel room. Was it a mistake or something more? The headlines speculated, and people began sharing their own stories of similar treatment at high-end places. Althea didn't respond publicly. She didn't need to. She had already taken the first step towards something bigger. Soon, the Regal Crest Hotel would no longer be in the hands of those who thought they could decide who belonged and who didn't. And when she returned, it wouldn't be as a guest. It would be as the owner. Althea sat in her office, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. A cup of coffee sat untouched on her desk as she scrolled through the financial reports her advisor had sent. The Regal Crest Hotel was in trouble. Debt was piling up. Maintenance costs were rising, and its profits had been declining for years. It was exactly what she had expected. She leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smile forming. "They need a buyer," she murmured to herself, "and I'll be that buyer." Her mind worked fast. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting a new standard. She had built her empire by making smart investments, turning struggling businesses into thriving successes. The Regal Crest Hotel would be no different. She picked up the phone and called her legal team. "I want you to set up a private inquiry about the hotel's ownership," she said. "Make it discreet. They can't know I'm the one interested, yet." Her lawyers got to work, reaching out to the hotel's investors and analyzing their financial situation. Within days, they confirmed what Althea had suspected. The current owner was desperate to sell, but he wanted the right deal. Althea played the game smartly. Through a network of business contacts, she arranged a meeting with the hotel's owner under the name of a private investment firm. She wanted to see him, to hear how he spoke about his hotel, and most importantly, to make sure he had no idea who she was. When the day of the meeting arrived, Althea walked into a high-end restaurant where the owner, Mr. Whitmore, was already waiting. He was an older man with neatly combed silver hair, wearing an expensive suit, but there was tension in his face. He was worried. As they spoke, Whitmore bragged about the hotel's history, its reputation for an exclusive clientele, and its long-standing traditions. Althea listened patiently, nodding at the right moments. She could tell he didn't want just anyone buying the hotel. He wanted someone who would maintain its image. "I'm looking for an investor who understands what makes the Regal Crest special," Whitmore said. "It's not just a hotel. It's a legacy." Althea smiled. "I agree. A place like this should be in the right hands." He had no idea that the woman sitting across from him was the same person his staff had turned away just days ago. They discussed numbers, and Althea made a generous offer, one that would clear his debts and leave him with a profit. Whitmore was tempted, but he hesitated. "I'll need some time to think about it," he said. Althea nodded. "Of course. Take your time." But she knew she had him. As she left the meeting, She walked with confidence. The deal was as good as done. Soon, the hotel that had refused her would be hers. And when that day came, everything about it was going to change. A week later, Althea received the call she had been expecting. Her assistant walked into her office with a calm but knowing smile. "It's Mr. Whitmore," she said, handing over the phone. Althea took a deep breath before answering. "Mr. Whitmore, I hope you've had time to consider my offer." There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh. "I have," he said, "and I believe we have a deal." Althea leaned back in her chair, a small smile forming. "That's wonderful news. I'll have my legal team finalize the details. You'll receive all necessary documents by the end of the day." Whitmore hesitated. "I just want to make sure the new ownership respects the hotel's traditions. It has a certain prestige, you know." Althea kept her voice smooth. "Of course. My team values the history of every establishment we acquire. I promise it will remain a place of excellence." She could hear the relief in his voice. "Good, good. Then I look forward to closing the deal." After the call ended, Althea put her phone down and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The hotel was hers. The same place that had refused her was now under her name. But she wasn't done yet. She immediately called her executive team. "We own the Regal Crest," she announced. "Now, let's make some changes." Over the next few days, Althea moved fast. She had her staff review every detail of the hotel. The policies, the employee records, the guest service reports. As she expected, there were patterns. Certain guests were treated differently than others. Some complaints about discrimination had been ignored. It was clear that the problem wasn't just the staff at the front desk, it was the entire system. She wasn't going to let that continue. A week later, she arrived at the hotel, not as a guest, but as the owner. She stepped through the same glass doors that had once been closed to her, except this time, no one could turn her away. The employees didn't recognize her at first. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed billionaire. But when she stepped up to the front desk, the same receptionist who had denied her before was standing there. "Good evening," the woman said, forcing a smile. "Do you have a reservation?" Althea smiled back, but this time it was different. "No," she said calmly. "I don't need one." Confused, the receptionist looked at her screen. "I'm sorry, but we—" Before she could finish, the hotel's general manager, a tall man in a suit, rushed forward, his face pale. "Ms. Monroe," he said quickly, "welcome. We weren't expecting you today." The receptionist's face turned pale as she realized the truth. Althea nodded. "I like to keep things unexpected." She looked around the lobby, taking in everything. This was just the beginning. Changes were coming, and no one could stop them. Althea walked through the grand lobby of the Regal Crest Hotel with slow, deliberate steps. The same chandeliers sparkled overhead, the same luxurious furniture sat in place, and the same soft music played in the background. But everything felt different now. Because now, this hotel belonged to her. The employees watched her with curious and nervous glances. Some of them had no idea who she was, while others had already started whispering. The news had spread fast. There was a new owner, and she had arrived unannounced. Althea made her way to the reception desk, where the same receptionist who had denied her a room stood stiffly. The woman's face was tight with worry, her hands clasped together, as if she was hoping Althea wouldn't recognize her. But Althea did. "Good evening," Althea said smoothly, placing her hands on the desk. "Do you remember me?" The receptionist hesitated. I believe we may have met before," she stammered. Althea let the moment stretch. The woman shifted uncomfortably. "I came here not too long ago," Althea continued. "I had a reservation, but I was told the hotel was fully booked." The receptionist swallowed hard. I'm sure there must have been some mistake." Althea smiled, but it wasn't just amusement, it was power. Yes, she said. A very big mistake. But don't worry. I've taken care of it. Before the woman could say another word, the hotel's general manager rushed forward. His face was pale, his hands fidgeting. Ms. Monroe, he said quickly, it's a pleasure to have you here. If there's anything you need. Althea turned to him. I do need something, she said. I need to understand why this hotel, which prides itself on being one of the best, has such poor customer service. The manager looked like he had swallowed a lemon. I assure you, we value all of our guests. Althea raised an eyebrow. Do you? She asked. Because I have records of multiple complaints from guests who were treated unfairly. I have proof that certain customers were denied service for reasons that had nothing to do with availability. The manager's face turned red. He glanced at the receptionist, who looked like she wanted to disappear. I don't believe in running a business that turns people away based on anything other than professionalism, Althea continued. And from this moment forward, things are going to change. She turned to her assistant, who handed her a folder. Inside was a list of employees who had received complaints about unfair treatment toward guests. She had done her research, and now it was time for action. I will be personally reviewing staff performances, Althea announced, her voice carrying through the lobby. Anyone who cannot treat every guest with the same level of respect and hospitality will no longer work here. A heavy silence fell over the room. The employees looked at one another, uncertain. Some were nervous, but others seemed relieved. Althea saw the difference in their faces. Some had been part of the problem. Others had been too afraid to speak up. That was about to change. This hotel would no longer be a place where people were judged unfairly. This hotel would now be a place where everyone was welcome. Althea didn't waste time. The very next morning, she held a meeting with the entire hotel staff. Every employee, from the receptionists to the housekeeping team, gathered in the grand conference hall. The air was thick with tension. Some people sat stiffly, afraid of what was coming, while others exchanged uncertain glances. Althea stood at the front, looking out at the room. She wasn't angry. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here to make things right. I bought this hotel for one reason, she began, her voice calm but firm. Because I believe it can be better. A few employees shifted in their seats. The general manager sat at the front, nodding eagerly, but Althea could tell he was nervous. I've read every customer complaint from the past 5 years, she continued, and I've seen a pattern. Some guests were treated like royalty, while others were treated as if they didn't belong. The room was silent. Some people lowered their heads. Others straightened in their seats, as if they had been waiting for this moment. That ends today, Althea said. From now on, this hotel will treat every guest with the same level of respect and excellence. No more unfair treatment. No more hidden rules. No more choosing who is worthy of staying here. A murmur spread through the room. Some employees looked uncomfortable, while others nodded in agreement. I know that not everyone here is part of the problem. Althea continued. Some of you have always treated guests with kindness and professionalism. I appreciate that, and I want to reward that. But for those who think they can continue the old ways, she paused, letting her gaze move across the room. You're in the wrong place. The general manager cleared his throat. Ms. Monroe, we've always followed standard policies. Althea turned to him. Then the policies need to change. She gestured to her assistant, who passed out printed documents to every employee. These are the new guidelines, she said. They include fair treatment policies, updated customer service expectations, and a new training program that every single employee must complete. A woman from the housekeeping staff raised her hand. Does this mean we'll finally get proper breaks? She asked. Althea nodded. Yes, better working conditions for everyone. If we want this hotel to be the best, we have to treat our staff with the same respect we give our guests. There was a shift in the room. Some employees looked relieved. Others, particularly those who had benefited from the old ways, looked uncomfortable. "One more thing," Althea added. "Promotions will no longer be based on favoritism. Hard work and dedication will be rewarded. No exceptions." For the first time, there was a small ripple of applause. Althea smiled. Change wasn't easy, but it was necessary. This hotel would no longer be a place of exclusion. It would be a place of excellence. For everyone. The days that followed were filled with change. Some people resisted at first, but Althea expected that. Change was never easy, especially for those who had been comfortable with the old ways. But she didn't let that stop her. She personally oversaw the implementation of the new policies. Every staff member was required to attend customer service training, where they learned how to treat every guest with the same level of respect. The training wasn't just about rules, it was about mindset. Althea wanted them to understand why this change mattered. Some employees grumbled, but others embraced it. The housekeeping staff, who had often been overlooked, were now being treated with respect. The front desk workers who had always done their job fairly felt relieved that they no longer had to follow unfair expectations. But there were still some who resisted. One afternoon, Althea received a report that a longtime employee, Mr. Dawson, had openly complained about the changes. He had been working at the hotel for over 20 years and didn't believe anything needed to change. She decided to speak with him directly. She found him in the staff lounge, sitting with a few other employees. When they saw her, the room went silent. "Mr. Dawson," Althea said, sitting across from him, "I hear you have concerns about the new policies." The older man folded his arms. "I just don't see why we need to fix something that wasn't broken." Althea met his gaze calmly. "Not broken for who?" she asked. Mr. Dawson hesitated. "This hotel has always had a reputation for being exclusive. It's what made it special." Althea nodded. "Exclusive to who?" Another silence. The other employees in the room glanced at each other, but no one spoke. Althea leaned forward. "This hotel is special because of the service it provides, not because of who it keeps out. And if we don't evolve, we will fall behind." Mr. Dawson sighed. "I've been here for years. It's hard to see things change so fast." Althea softened. "I understand that, and I appreciate the work you've put in. But tell me something. What's more important, the history of this place or the future?" Mr. Dawson looked down for a moment, then let out a slow breath. "The future, I suppose." Althea smiled. "Good, because I want you to be part of that future, but only if you're willing to move forward with us." Mr. Dawson was quiet for a long time before he finally nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll give it a try." That was all Althea needed to hear. She stood up and addressed the room. "This hotel is going to be the best, not just for a few, but for everyone. And I hope every one of you will be part of that." As she walked out, she knew she was one step closer to making that vision a reality. Months passed, and the Regal Crest Hotel had transformed into something new. The changes Althea had put in place were no longer just policies written on paper. They were now a part of the hotel's culture. Guests from all walks of life were welcomed with warmth and professionalism. The front desk staff no longer hesitated when checking in someone who didn't fit the outdated image of exclusivity. The housekeeping staff, once ignored, now had better wages and proper breaks. The dining hall, once known for serving only a particular type of clientele, now had a diverse crowd enjoying its fine cuisine. And most importantly, the employees who stayed had embraced the change. One evening, Althea walked through the hotel lobby, watching as guests laughed and chatted. She had been visiting regularly, making sure that things continued to run smoothly. Tonight, she wasn't here for a business meeting. She was here to see the results of everything she had worked for. She took a seat at the hotel's elegant lounge, enjoying the soft piano music playing in the background. A waiter approached her with a friendly smile. "Good evening, Ms. Monroe. Would you like your usual tea?" She smiled. "Yes, please." As she waited, she noticed a family entering the hotel. A mother, father, and their young daughter. They looked around, clearly visiting for the first time. A receptionist greeted them warmly. "Welcome to the Regal Crest. Do you have a reservation?" The father nodded. "Yes, under the name Carter." The receptionist typed into the computer, then smiled. "Ah, yes. We have your suite ready. Welcome to our hotel." Althea watched as the family was checked in smoothly. There was no hesitation, no unnecessary questions, no second-guessing, just pure hospitality. At that moment, she knew she had won. She had turned this place into what it was always meant to be, a hotel where everyone was treated with respect and dignity. As she sipped her tea, the hotel's general manager, who had once been nervous about her leadership, approached her table. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "I just wanted to say, I was skeptical at first, but you were right. This hotel is better now than it ever was." Althea smiled. "That's because we stopped holding on to the past and started looking toward the future." The manager nodded. "A lot of guests have been returning, and new ones keep coming in. The Regal Crest is making headlines for all the right reasons now." Althea simply nodded. She didn't need to boast about it. The results spoke for themselves. She looked around one more time, taking in the beauty of what she had built. She had once walked into this hotel and been told she didn't belong. Now she was the reason it had become a place where everyone belonged. And that was the greatest success of all.